Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're looking at interpersonal communication and especially this idea of building rapport quickly. We'll be exploring excerpts from the book, How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. And really kind of trying to put together like a toolkit, I guess you could say, for connecting more effectively with anyone.
Yeah, it is amazing how much goes on in those first 90 seconds. And the book really digs into not just, what we say, but like how our senses play such a big role.
Yeah, and I'm all about those little details, those things that make somebody memorable. And the book opens up with this story about Jill, a teacher who could only remember her former students if she associated them with like a strong visual.
Oh, wow.
Like the girl with the bright pink hair or like the guy with the mismatched socks. And what's interesting is it's not just about, those quirky fashion choices, but it really does highlight how our brains really latch onto visuals.
It's so true. And it's like you're giving people a visual handle almost. Like it makes you memorable. What's your handle? Like think about it. Is it your style or a unique accessory? Or even like a signature gesture? I think it's definitely worth considering what makes you visually distinct.
Hmm. I never thought of it that way. Now I'm wondering if I need to step up my accessory game. But it's got to be more to it than visuals, right? The book also goes into like these sensory preferences,
Oh, yeah.
which I find really fascinating.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just about being a visual person. The book explains how, like, we each have this dominant sense, whether it's sight, sound, or touch, that shapes how we experience the world. So, for example, imagine three friends are at a concert, right? The visual person, they're totally captivated by the light show. The auditory person is lost in the music. And then the kinesthetic person is all about the energy of the crowd.
Oh, so we're all at the same event, but experiencing it through these completely different lenses. It makes you wonder how often we misinterpret each other because we're not speaking the same like sensory language.
Right, and that's where recognizing other people's sensory preferences is so important for building that rapport. The book gives this great example of Barbara, a flooring store owner. She was trying to sell this luxurious carpet to this customer, but he wasn't really biting. And she noticed he kept running his hand over the samples, clearly drawn to the texture.
So she switched tactics and started talking about how the carpet felt.
Exactly. She emphasized the softness and the plushness, and guess what? He bought it. That's the power of tapping into someone's dominant sense. Think about your own interactions. Have you ever been in a situation where understanding someone's sensory preference could have, like, made a difference?
Gosh, this is really making me rethink all those times I tried to explain something complex to my friend who's a total visual learner. Maybe I should draw him a diagram or something.
Right. Yeah. And the book even points out how this plays out in politics. There was an anecdote about two politicians, one who was using visually driven language, like leaning heavily, and another who favored auditory terms, like clearly hearing the concerns of the people. And it really does make you wonder, did that more auditory politician have an advantage on radio
Oh,
interviews?
that's a great point. It's like we're drawn to people who speak our sensory language without even realizing it.
Yeah.
But how do you figure out someone's dominant sense without just straight up asking them?
Well, there are some telltale signs. We can look for verbal cues, like the words people use, and nonverbal cues, like their body language. And then the book even goes deeper and introduces this idea of eye accessing cues.
Ooh, tell me more about that. Eye accessing cues sounds like mind reading or something.
Well, it's not magic, but it can feel that way. Essentially, the direction that our eyes move can indicate how we're processing information. For example, if someone looks up and to the left, they might be visualizing something.
Oh, so like they're painting a picture in their mind. That makes sense. What about other eye movements?
If they look up and to the right, they're likely recalling a visual memory. And then looking sideways to the left often means that they're constructing sounds, while looking sideways to the right means they're recalling a sound. And then looking down and to the left can indicate that they're accessing feelings.
Wow, so many nuances to this. I'm starting to see how these cues could be useful for understanding people better. But isn't it a little risky, like staring at people's eyes during a conversation and trying to decode their every glance?
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid concern. It's all about being discreet. The goal is to build rapport, not make people self-conscious.
Right. Don't want to turn it into a staring contest.
Exactly. And remember, these cues are just indicators, not absolute truth. Everyone is this unique blend of sensory preferences.
Okay. So subtle observation is key. I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to these cues from now on.
Yeah.
But before we all turn into like eye movement detectives, let's step back for a second. Because we got to remember the bigger picture here is creating genuine connections, right?
Exactly.
I'm curious, what are some other techniques that we can use to build that instant rapport?
Well, the book highlights four key elements: attitude, synchronization, conversation, and then, of course, those sensory preferences we've been talking about. And it all starts with a really useful attitude, as the author puts it.
I love that. It sounds so simple but powerful.
It really is. And it's about approaching interactions with genuine warmth and openness and really a desire to connect. Think about it. Don't you instantly feel more at ease around someone who just exudes that positivity?
Absolutely. It's like contagious. So how does this really useful attitude actually translate it into like our communication?
Well, remember the three V's of communication: visual, vocal, and verbal. A genuinely positive attitude, it shines through in our body language, our tone of voice, and even our choice of words. And that makes us more approachable and likable, making it easier to connect with others.
Okay, so projecting warmth and positivity, that's a great starting point.
Yeah.
But what about those times when you're meeting someone new and maybe you're feeling a little nervous? Like, how do you break the ice and start building that rapport?
Well, the book has this interesting concept called assuming rapport.
Assuming rapport. I've never even heard of that. What is that exactly?
It's about going into those interactions with this positive expectation that you will connect with that other person regardless of the circumstance.
Just like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. If you believe that you'll connect, you're more likely to act in ways that encourage that connection.
Exactly. But sometimes our own assumptions can get in the way. The book tells this story about a high school student with a bright green mohawk who was having trouble finding a job.
Oh no, I can already see where this is going. People were probably making judgments about him based solely on his appearance.
You got it. Potential employers saw that mohawk and they immediately jumped to conclusions about his character and his work ethic, even though he might have been a fantastic employee. And it really just highlights the power of assumptions and how they can create these barriers to connection.
That's such a powerful reminder for all of us to check our own assumptions. Are we letting those preconceived notions get in the way of making those genuine connections? It's so easy to judge a book by its cover, or in this case, a person by their mohawk. Such a good point. We all make those assumptions, but the key is to be aware of them
Yeah.
and challenge them, especially the ones that might be getting in the way of connecting with others.
Yeah.
So how can we move beyond those snap judgments and create a more open and receptive environment for building rapport?
Well, it goes back to those four key elements we talked about earlier. Remember, attitude, synchronization, conversation, and sensory preferences. Each one of those plays a crucial role in bridging that gap between assumptions and genuine connection.
Okay, so let's break those down a little further. We already talked about the importance of that really useful attitude, approaching those interactions with warmth and positivity. But what about synchronization? What does that even mean when we're talking about building rapport?
Synchronization is all about creating a sense of harmony and connection through our nonverbal communication. It's about subtly mirroring the other person's body language, their tone of voice, even their pace of speech.
So it's not about like mimicking them exactly, but more about finding a natural rhythm together.
Exactly. When we synchronize with someone, we're creating this sense of shared understanding and connection. Like we're subconsciously saying, hey, I'm on the same wavelength as you.
I can see how that would make people feel more comfortable and open to connecting. It's like creating a safe space for conversation.
Precisely. And speaking of conversation, that's our third key element. The book really emphasizes the importance of asking open-ended questions, things that encourage the other person to share their thoughts and feelings.
So you're not just waiting for your turn to talk. You're genuinely interested in what they have to say.
Right. Active listening is so crucial. It's about truly hearing and understanding the other person's perspective.
And that's where those sensory preferences come back into play, right? We can use what we know about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic cues to tailor our communication style and make that other person feel heard and understood.
Absolutely. If you're talking to someone who seems to be a visual learner, you might use more visual language. You could even draw a diagram to get your point across. And if they seem more auditory, you might want to use a more melodic tone of voice or emphasize the sounds of words.
It's like speaking their language, even if it's not a language we're consciously aware of.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of understanding those sensory preferences. It helps us to connect on a deeper level, even if we don't share the same dominant sense.
It's making me think about how much communication goes on beneath the surface. Like we're always sending and receiving signals without even realizing it.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? And the more we understand those signals, the better we'll be at navigating that complex world of human interaction.
Okay, so we've covered attitude, synchronization, and conversation. Now let's dive back into those eye accessing cues. I'm still a little intrigued. and I'll admit a little skeptical. Is there any science behind this, or is it more of a parlor trick?
Oh, it's definitely not a parlor trick. There's a lot of research in neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, that supports the idea that our eye movements can reflect our thought processes.
So it's not just some random theory that someone came up with. There's actual science to back it up.
Exactly. NLP researchers have found that certain eye movements tend to go with specific types of mental processing. For instance, if someone's visualizing something, they're more likely to look up and to the left. And if they're trying to remember a sound, they might look sideways to the right.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be useful. But I have to admit, I'm still a little hesitant to start analyzing everyone's eye movements during conversations.
Yeah, it's a little bit intrusive.
I get it. It's super important to be mindful and respectful when you're observing those eye accessing cues.
Right.
You don't want to make people feel self-conscious or like they're being put under a microscope. So it's more about subtle observation than overt scrutiny.
Exactly. The key is to be aware of these cues without making them the center of your attention. It's just one piece of the puzzle when you're trying to understand and connect with someone.
Right. We don't want to get so caught up in the technicalities that we miss the big picture of building that genuine rapport.
Exactly. And sometimes the best way to connect with someone is just to be present, listen attentively, and respond authentically.
I love that. Sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective. But speaking of simple approaches, the book talks about these things called verbal cues that can help us identify someone's sensory preferences. What are those exactly?
Verbal cues are all about the words that people use. For example, someone who uses visual words a lot, like see, clear, or bright, might have a visual preference. And someone who says hear, sound, or rhythm a lot could be more auditory. And if someone uses words like feel, touch, or grasp, they might be more kinesthetic.
So it's about paying attention to their language patterns and noticing any recurring themes. It's like a linguistic treasure hunt.
Exactly. And the more you listen for these cues, the more you'll start to notice them automatically.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my detective hat and start analyzing everyone's vocabulary. But before I get too carried away, what about those nonverbal cues we talked about before? Can you give me some examples of those?
Absolutely. Nonverbal cues are all about body language. Visual people often have very upright posture and tend to gesture with their hands, like they're painting a picture in the air. They might also be very particular about their appearance and have a very focused gaze.
So they're the ones who always look perfect, even if they just rolled out of bed.
You could say that they're very visually oriented, so they definitely pay attention to those details. Auditory people, on the other hand, tend to move their heads from side to side, as if they're listening to music. They might also have a more melodic tone of voice and use more rhythmic gestures.
It's like they're conducting an orchestra with their body language. What about those kinesthetic people? What are their telltale signs?
Kinesthetic people are all about comfort and movement. They tend to dress in comfortable clothes, move more slowly and deliberately, and they might use gestures that emphasize touch or physical sensation.
So they're the ones who are always touching your arm or giving you a hug.
They might be. They're very in tune with their physical sensations and enjoy connecting through touch.
This is all making so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we put all these pieces together? How do we use this knowledge about attitude synchronization, conversation, and sensory preferences to actually build rapport like a pro?
It's about being mindful of all those elements and using them in a way that feels natural and authentic. You want to be present, listen attentively, and respond in a way that really resonates with that other person.
So it's not about following a script or a formula. It's about being adaptable and responsive to what's going on in that interaction.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the easier it'll get. You'll start to pick up on those cues without even thinking about it, and you'll automatically adjust your communication style.
It's like learning a new language. At first, you have to think about every word and grammar rule, but eventually it just becomes second nature.
That's a great analogy. And just like learning a new language, the more you immerse yourself in it, the more fluent you'll become.
I'm really feeling inspired to start putting these techniques into practice and see what kind of connections I can make. But before we all go out there and become rapport-building ninjas, is there anything else we should keep in mind?
One last thing to remember. Building rapport is a two-way street. It's not just about us. It's about being open to connecting with others and giving them the space to connect with us.
So it's not just about what we do, but also about who we are.
Exactly. Authenticity is key. People can tell when you're being genuine, and that's what creates those lasting connections.
Yeah, I love that thought. Authenticity is key. It's not about putting on some kind of show or trying to be someone you're not. It's about showing up as yourself and letting that genuine connection happen naturally.
Absolutely. And remember, building rapport, it's a journey, not like a destination. It's something we can keep learning and improving on throughout our lives.
So it's not about like mastering a secret formula or something. It's about having this mindset of openness and curiosity and really wanting to connect with people.
Exactly. It's about going into those interactions, wanting to create a shared experience, to really understand and be understood.
And I think we've really only just scratched the surface of this whole world of interpersonal communication. This deep dive has been a real eye-opener, no pun intended.
I'm glad to hear that. It really is amazing how much we can learn about ourselves and other people just by paying attention to those little cues and signals we're always sending and receiving.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, let's recap those key takeaways for our listeners. The actionable steps they can start using today to build rapport like a pro. First up, it all starts with that really useful attitude.
Right. Having a positive mindset is so important. It's the foundation for making those genuine connections. It's about approaching people with warmth and openness and really wanting to connect with them.
So check your attitude at the door and come into those conversations with a smile and a sense of curiosity. What's next on our rapport building checklist?
Next up, remember the power of synchronization. It's not about copying someone's every move, but it's about finding that rhythm together. Subtly mirror their body language, their tone of voice, their pace of speech. That creates a sense of shared understanding and connection.
It's almost like dancing with someone, finding that flow together.
Okay.
Yeah, got it. Synchronization check.
Yeah.
What else should we be mindful of?
Conversation is key. Remember to ask open-ended questions to get people talking. Encourage them to share their thoughts and feelings. And be an active listener. Really try to hear and understand their perspective.
Don't just wait for your turn to speak. Really engage with what they're saying, and don't forget about those sensory preferences.
Absolutely. Pay attention to the words people use their body language, even those eye-accessing cues we talked about. Use all that to tailor how you communicate with them. Speak their language, even if it's not a language you're consciously thinking about.
Be a sensory detective. Observe those subtle cues and change your approach as needed. This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have so many new tools to build better connections.
And remember, don't use these techniques to try and manipulate or control other people. It's about creating a space where you can be open and authentic and let that genuine connection grow.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into building rapport, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I would say embrace the journey. It's an ongoing process of learning, growing, and connecting with all those amazing people around us.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the art of building rapport. We hope you've enjoyed the journey and feel ready to put these techniques into practice. Until next time, happy connecting.